Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of MEED Live. We have a very exciting broadcast today. Over the past few months, we've been looking at the challenges facing the construction industry in the GCC and in the UAE. And we've also touched on the potential for using digitalization and different forms of contract to improve the delivery of projects in the region. Throughout, we've been working with Mashreq Bank to deliver these webinars, and today we're coming to the third phase of the programme, and we're going to look at case studies, how innovation is being applied in the construction industry today, where it is working, where the challenges are, and what we can do to accelerate that programme and the next generation of the construction industry's evolution. I'm joined today by a fantastic panel of experts from across both the construction, finance and technology chain, and I will just introduce them. On my left I have Tobias Bauly, who is the project director from the Museum of the Future project in Dubai. Welcome, Tobias.
Hi, Richard. Hello, thank you.
Now, the Museum of the Future, this is a project that is by design to promote innovation, and so it is doing that in its construction as well, is it?
Yeah, it's a great symbol for the conversation today. So. The technology story for the Museum of the Future started back a few years ago when our architect Sean Killer penned the elliptical form, and when he did that, he immediately triggered a chain of events needing our engineers and architects, the entire team, and now our contracting team, to innovate and use technology to make that vision viable, make his original vision viable. So as an umbrella statement, technology has really enabled a building as wild and wonderful as that shape to come to fruition.
Okay, well, we can come back to some of the case studies and examples throughout the broadcast. Next to Tobias, we have Dominic Wright. Dominic, welcome.
Thank you very much.
You are a 3D printing company, is that correct?
Yeah.
And is construction a growth sector for 3D printing?
Yeah, absolutely. So traditionally, we work in more traditional 3D printing materials, metals and plastics for automotive industry and architecture, but the next stage for us and the industry is concrete and construction.
Fantastic. Well, welcome to MEED Live. On my right, we're joined by Sandeep Chouhan. Now, Sandeep is the Chief Operations Officer for Mashreq, and you are from a tech background yourself, and obviously the financial sector is being disrupted and transformed by fintechs and this digital transformation. Do you see the same process happening in construction?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for hosting us. Clearly, the financial services is running a few generations ahead in the use of the digital technologies. There are several elements of technology, particularly mobility, use of big data analytics, and the use of robotic and artificial intelligence, which I think is clearly has a crossover capabilities as we come into the what is the growth engine of the UAE economy is the construction industry. So yeah, clearly we will see a lot of crossover in the years to come.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, we have Aref Boualwan, who is the manager for Management Information Systems at CCC. So CCC is one of the biggest at-risk contractors in the Middle East, if not the biggest. But actually, your more important job is you head CCC's presidential initiative to drive innovation in construction, which is fantastic that a company in the Middle East is actually, a construction company, is thinking like this. What does that job involve?
First, thanks for being here. It's a great pleasure to be with you and the gentlemen here. We have taken commitment from the President to drive innovation in the region as part of our commitment to support startups in the Arab world and the region as part of our corporate social responsibility and source innovation into CCC and pilot project.
And so partly, I'm probably being melodramatic, but it's part of this because you see the disruption to construction, and for existing players, that's dangerous if you don't move. So CCC is actually positioning itself for the way the industry is going to change.
Very true, and we're taking a step further, and we're trying to disrupt with startup the industry.
Okay, so you're trying to make the disruption
yes,
happen.
Exactly. It's rather the best thing to see the future is to create it. So we're trying with these startups. We're now currently collaborating with more than 10 startups, and we have sealed a strategic partnership with many in order to disrupt the construction. So we have committed to be the leader in that field.
Okay, fantastic. Well, welcome to all of you. Let's get started with the discussion. Tobias, if I can start with you, I think probably we should get an idea of where is construction today. In your opinion, is construction struggling to adapt to digital transformation? Is it stuck in the old-fashioned habits and inefficient processes, or have we passed the tipping point? Are we now transforming?
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly all talked about the construction industry and compared it to, well, certainly not the likes of IT and automotive and aeronautical, and of course it does lag behind in terms of its innovation and technology, its adoption of it. We are slow to adopt it fundamentally. Museum of the Future gives us some great examples of the good steps that are happening, and of course the BIM story is a huge one, particularly attached to the design phase. And what we're seeing on that project in particular is the transition of all that intellect in the digital environment through using BIM. We've talked about genuine implementation of 4D and 5D, the BIM terms that everyone's talking about. We're seeing that for real happening on the Museum of the Future and the tangible benefits.
So when we say 4D and 5D, so standard BIM is 3D modelling with software and design, 4D is costs and 5D is time element. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, all those separate components, fundamentally we talk about the project being 100% BIM. And we want, when we coined the phrase from Bill Gates, a PC on every desk, we're now talking about BIM on every desk, and we want every part of the...
Are we close to that yet?
We're getting there.
Right.
It does depend on the project. The Museum of the Future, of course, in the limelight as a piece of innovation and technology in its own right, and it represents the innovation that will be exhibited in the building. So, of course, it should be a showcase for that. And some of the more tangible examples are things like the geometry story. Of course, if you've driven down Shakeside Road any time recently, you'll see the dramatic elliptical shape that's rising out of the site. And to achieve that form during construction, one of the key in terms of risk management for us, with my supervisory hat on, but also for the contractor in terms of risk management, is monitoring the movement of that very complex geometry. And BIM has enabled us to do that. So we're carrying out very high-end laser scanning. We have a company called Trimble who do a lot of our data acquisition, big data, handling of big data, as Sandeep has already mentioned. And that allows us to, every time we lift one of these jigsaw puzzles that you're seeing as you drive past it, every time we carry out that operation on site, a very delicate operation, and the building moves slightly, as we predict it will, we're able to go back into the model using the laser 3D scans and monitor and assess its movements and make decisions from there.
Okay, so
that's all about risk management.
You have this sort of vertical donut-shaped building, sort of elliptical donut-shaped building with the steel structure made of little X braces. And there are sensors all over, or they're being laser tracked?
There are two ways to do it. The old school way was to use the good old-fashioned theodolite and shoot some points, and of course that takes forever. And now we're looking at either sensor technology, but the method we're employing on site is a very clever bit of kit that takes a full laser scan of the entire environment and terabytes of data of all the surfaces it picks up. And that surface is brought into the BIM model, and you can physically see in real time the as-built structure, and we can compare that to the original geometry that we're delivering for the client.
Yes, I have a question. So, as a crucible of innovation, and really the physical manifestation of that, do you see innovation in that crucible reaching commercialization fairly quickly?
I think my observations at the moment, not so much. I think the Museum of the Future is an exceptional case because the form has demanded a certain level of innovation. I think the trickle down from our projects even to, let's say, a more conventional rectilinear building, I think that step itself has yet to happen. Not everybody is fully 100% BIM. So I think we're quite a few steps before the commercial sides, the environment that you're in, Sandeep, we'll probably begin to reiterate all of the benefits that we can rely on in terms of capability on site.
But have you been able to tickle the innovation of the startups? Because you're giving them a great opportunity to come in and showcase all the clever ideas they have. Do you think you've become that magnet of attracting startups?
Yeah, we certainly get a lot of interest. And I mean, we're quite fortunate that everybody comes to the project. It's very visual now in particular. And we have a lot of interest from all walks of life. We've talked about, and we will talk about 3D printing, of course. So there's lots of engagement on the project for that, lots of interest. Everybody wants to already implement their latest technology in some sort of activity that we're carrying out on construction. And so the project is a great magnet for that exactly. So
we'll come on to 3D printing in a bit more detail later on, I think. But I think just for me, my takeaway from what you've just said is sort of BIM is well established, and we're getting towards 100% sort of uptake of BIM and more advanced models.
Yeah.
I guess the next question for me is, what comes next? What's the next generation of technology? And Aref, if I can come to you, so you in your opening comments, you talked about creating the disruption, setting out the path of the future. So in terms of the construction industry, where are going to be the biggest areas of disruption? What do you think, and I guess it follows Sandeep's question about where the startups will be, where are the disruptions going to happen?
Brilliant. Allow me first to compliment on the very important 2 points that he mentioned. First, the 3D scanning. 3D scanning has been for many years at the heart of our construction life cycle. And one of the many use cases that we have implemented that we never imagined this is going to be the use case is that the fact first that in the region, given the economy and the challenges of the market, construction market, clients tend to give sometimes the contracts to the cheapest contractors.
Yeah.
Many of the contracts that were not awarded to CC in the region, in the last few years, the contractor couldn't fulfill their obligations, and it was at 50-60% progress transferred to CC, and we were asked to jump in and take over the project. And you don't have BIM model in most of them. What can you do? What we did is the 3D scanning. We scan it's like you want to generate 3D model out of this room. What you do is you do 3D scanning. It will generate the 3D model automatically for you, and you load it into the BIM model, and you can understand the as-built and start working. Without 3D scanning, the cost of continuing the project would have been tremendously high. So it helped us a lot. Another thing, the BIM, to complement the BIM.
And 3D scanning, Dominic, Tobias talked about using advanced system, not just theodolites and sort of the old manual 3D surveying. So you're talking about laser surveying and...
We're not going to go technicality given the time, but it's the same thing he talked about. Exactly, okay. He put it in perfect. This is what we implemented in that use case, which we never imagined. Another one for BIM, what's coming next is what we're doing now, piloting in many projects in UAE and in the region, is to take BIM to the field. Take BIM to the planning stage and take BIM to the execution stage. And BIM to be part of to drive the whole project life cycle from design, engineering, construction until project handover and probably operation and maintenance, rather than BIM being just another silo.
So when you say take BIM to the field, are we in the financial sector, one of the transformations through big data is mobile services.
Yeah.
Does taking BIM to the field, you're talking about engineers on site or people on site with tablets using the BIM?
But it's what brings to the project management methodology is what matters. This is the tool, is that it will make the project, it falls under the first silo I talked about, the first part, which is internal process improvement. It will drive your project better, it will deliver the project in a shorter time, and it will be higher quality and less cost. So this is where BIM falls into. You asked me the question on the disruptive technology. We in CC, besides the present initiative that we have for innovation R&D, we have another present initiative for startup, to support startup in the Arab world. Currently, we're working heavily with 10 startups, and we're bringing the startup, all these startup technologies, brilliant guys in their own field, but they lack the domain knowledge and the construction experience, while the contractors lack the knowledge of these startups. So what we did is we created a 3-element. We bring the startup, we create a committee inside CC which has a very diversified subject matter experts to bridge the gap to construction and to guide them, give them best practices, etc. And we create the field to test this technology at large scale. So when we have these
if
three elements.
If I'm a technology startup and I think my application can work in construction, I
Call
come
me.
to CCC.
Just call me.
You'll bring me in, you'll train me to be a construction company person, and then I can...
We don't have to train you. We will bridge the gap and help you succeed. We don't deal with startup as a client. We're not a client. No, we're a partner of a startup. We understand that technology is not mature. We help them to mature it in our field, and we help them to guide it the right way, given the domain knowledge we have.
Incubators.
When you and I, Sandeep, talked before about the financial sector being transformed, and you have the fintech startups, and you said banks of the future, you told me, would be the banks that could aggregate services from different startups. True. Do we see that happening in construction? Will the construction contractors of the future will be the, what should we call it, the anchor company, and then you'll bring in technologies from different 3D printing companies?
Yeah, I think companies like CCC will always remain the aggregators. They will continue to find innovation is around solving point problems to begin with, and some of them can get industrialized. So I'm glad to hear that they are offering that incubator style environment, which will encourage a crossover of innovation, whether it is in sensing technologies with the advancement in IoT, whether it is in the use of scanning technologies, mobility. And
with the CCC incubator, for me, an incubator is a startup from its very earliest days, and you provide mentoring and maybe finance. But are you talking about pure startups or companies that, perhaps like Dominic's company, that are established, but you're bringing them into the new construction industry?
You're bringing a very important point. What's the definition of startup? Startup can be a company, as long as the technology is being evolved and they're still mature. Some startups have been 7-8 years, and they have revenues.
So it doesn't literally mean a business startup, but it's new to construction.
The startup for me is that you have either technology innovation that you're adding it, something that's not common and has not been there for years. You're bringing something new to the table as for technology, or at least you're using a mature technology, you're buying it, but you have the knowledge in certain domain to be able to implement it. So it's either or. If you don't, you have to bring something new to the table. Otherwise, if you want, you can't call courier company a startup, because there is so many of them. It's a very mature business model. You can't call banking sector as a startup. But startups is everyone that brings something new to the table. I'm glad Sandeep used the word incubator, but don't take it literally. It's the idea of helping startup mature that technology, test it at a large scale, and use the huge knowledge that is embedded in 70 years old company called CCC, with so many subject matter experts that the startup lacks. So putting the puzzle together is where the startup will fly and mature that technology.
I think one of the very practical uses of virtual reality, which has taken the whole gaming industry by storm. For the first time, I think, listening to the emerging innovations and its usability in construction, I think we will see a very clever use of that technology, which significantly cuts down cycle time, right? Gives the consumer the speed, the cost, quality, dimension. So I think virtual reality has a huge promise, beyond what we are already seeing with 3D printing and others.
Sure, we are seeing that happen now. So I know you and I had a conversation on this just the other day. The VR is, of course, a hot topic, and again, using all of the intellect that lives in the models to be able to go in a 3D environment and to have everybody in the pool, clients, developers, engineers, the supervisors, the contractors, reviewing, coordinating in a 3D environment is much more powerful than the old 2D drawing days, particularly as buildings get more and more complex.
Very true.
If I can come to you, Dominic, thank you for your patience. We've heard a lot from the guys on the panel about where we are today and where we see it going. But you're exactly the sort of company I think that Aref is talking about. You're coming from the tech side. You're doing 3D printing, and you're starting to look in construction. So maybe if I can ask you first, how much knowledge do you have of construction? So this relates to Aref's point about bringing in companies like yourself? And then secondly, how do you see 3D printing developing? So if we start on the first point, what do you know about construction at the moment, and how much are you doing?
I think what Aref said is, I'd like to thank you for saying it. It's the first time I've ever heard someone in this region actually discuss technology and taking technology on board in that way, that there does need to be an entity, because we are not a construction company. We're a 3D printing company. We're a 3D printing design and 3D printing manufacturing company. That's what we're very good at. We are not a construction company.
And your background is from Formula One and from product design?
Yeah, so from automotive and product design is what our strengths are. So we understand engineering very well. We understand how to make parts or make designs much more efficient using 3D printing, and that can lend itself to construction, lend itself to construction companies. But there does need to be a driving force to then take that to market. And traditionally, I think obviously in the region, in all industries, there's a huge demand put on government to do that. It's, more often than not, it's left down to, it's going to be a government initiative and they're going to have to push it. But the reality is private players are going to have to come on board and do that. And it's amazing that that CCC are giving that platform to companies to, and for me the most important thing is, there is a huge interest in startups in the region, pre-revenue, pre-technology startups, and that's great. But getting startups where we've been around, 4 years now, and we are post-revenue, and we're not a traditional sense startup, to get that, to push those startups to the field, that's where innovation actually comes from.
And from my understanding of construction, we have prefabricated concrete, and you have steel sections that are made off-site, and then what's the difference between that and 3D printing?
There's two ways to 3D print concrete, though. Some companies like Winsun in China, who are probably the biggest in the world, they essentially 3D print prefabricated concrete. For me, that's not so exciting, because prefab concrete is already, very well established and can give contractors huge gains already. Then sort of the second way is printing on site.
So we're talking about on-site 3D printing?
So you have a machine on site as opposed to labourers. Very similar to a traditional 3D printer, with a nozzle with concrete, with a concrete composite that is laying down concrete.
It's spraying concrete onto some foundation or something. And going back to steel, some people are putting their sort of steel reinforcement in before it. People are trying to design ways that we're not going to need steel, going back to actually quite sort of antiquated construction methodologies where we're using shapes to try and give us that support. But that's all part of sort of the development. So you're talking about all of these aspects in construction, but you have no background in construction. So where do you get your information about what works? I mean, do you work with companies like CCC or consultants like Buro, Happold to understand the shapes and the needs for construction?
Yes, when we can, we do. But a lot of it does come from traditional engineering, where 3D printing has been so strong in areas like automotive and aerospace, is that they'll bring you a part, for example, a hinge part, and be able, and we're able to take that, re-engineer that, and say, as opposed to looking at traditional manufacturing methods, we're going to start from the design phase again, save weight, make the part have a higher tensile strength. So to lend those same thought patterns to construction is very helpful. And then obviously, we need feedback.
So it's very essential to. Sorry, it's very essential to. Let me first agree with exactly what you're saying. It's very essential for our viewers to differentiate between three industries in 3D printing, which have totally different application model. We have the metal 3D printing, we have the plastic 3D printing, and we have, which is a bit similar, but we have a totally different ball game, which is the concrete 3D printing. As far as CC, we're exploring now 2 out of these 3 heavily, and we have already pilot projects that we are deploying these technologies. As far as plastic first, we have signed a strategic partnership with Iman Salah, brilliant startup in Dubai with brilliant engineers, and we have done 2 major pilots in UAE. One, molds for constructions, which succeeded to print molds for construction, and another
one. This is for pouring concrete. This is the mold.
Exactly. So instead of printing the concrete itself, you print the formwork or the mold, so you can reuse it. It was a cycle of 3-4 months trial and error until we succeeded. And another one, exactly what you touch on, is probably falls under additive, what's called additive manufacturing or digital inventory. What we've done is in our plant machine vehicle yard in Abu Dhabi, we took many spare parts of our construction fleet, and we reverse engineered that spare parts, we printed them back, and we installed them. Now, as we speak, we have 6 spare parts who are installed on 6 construction machine operating as usual. And some of them even exceeded the traditional, and some of them even cheaper.
So it's not just the construction of the finished structure, it's also
no,
the equipment,
that's
the
one
machinery.
ball game, what we do.
Yeah.
The other ball game, what we're doing is that basically, given that we're in Dubai now, it's worth mentioning that the main motive behind us getting into 3D printing for concrete is to align ourselves with Dubai leadership vision for 3D printing concrete. We know that next year, all contractors are asked to use 2% of the buildings to be 3D printed, and it will increase 2% until it becomes 25 by 2030, I guess. So it's very essential for us to have, we have committed to align ourselves with this vision. And now we are doing pilots in different areas in the region for 3D printing, collaborating with startup. One is taking place in soon in Zahia, a mall with Futtaim in Sharjah. And another major project we have now, I cannot announce the detail because the client will announce it soon. It's a major construction. It's going to be one of the biggest in the region and the world when it comes to 3D printing concrete. It's going to be in the region also, as we're committed to do it in the Arab world, with most of the time startups from the region.
So I guess one question here is there enough capacity? Are there enough startups in this region, in this space? Because we hear one of the drivers for the UAE innovation strategy is to encourage startups and innovation, but a lot of it's happening in Silicon Valley or in other countries.
I think given the gentleman that he's coming from, consultant to the Dubai Future Museum, says a different message, if I may.
Okay.
I think when you have a leadership that sets a very aggressive goal to have 2% of your 3D of your building 3D printed, this will drive 3 sectors. Will drive the innovation in the contractors, will drive innovation in the startup, and most importantly, which I think we should touch on today, drive legislation. The biggest showstopper for startups in the Middle East now and in the world is legislation. When you hear about London doing legislation for autonomous driving, because this is the only way you can promote technology. And this is the leadership vision will drive, and I know for a fact that in Dubai today, there is so much effort to do legislation for 3D printing.
So maybe if we can come
and support that initiative.
Come to Dominic on that. So in terms of legislation for 3D printing and regulations and quality control and all of that, what's in place? How easy or difficult is it for your company in this market?
It's probably too easy right now. I think, legislation can be, like you said, a driving factor. It can also be a hindering factor in some countries that don't get it right and take too long. There's too much bureaucracy. But there does need to be some standardization. You mentioned Immensa Labs. We are quite a similar company to them, but we work very closely. We're looking at setting up an initiative where we have a 3D printing association with some of the leading 3D printing companies, leading construction companies in the region. Initially, to sort of set a framework for ourselves and almost self-govern ourselves, but then to try and get that to lead onto legislation. And when legislation does come in to give some sort of framework and drive the market, it will help companies like ours.
And in what way does it help? So you know what the standards are, so you can invest in certain levels of output or machinery or something like that?
I think it lends more to our potential customers. CCC would probably feel a lot more comfortable if there was legislation, if we were licensed, in correct ways, and knew that there were certain procedures that we had to follow, or, qualifications.
So at the moment, if I wanted to start a 3D printing company and selling products or services to construction, there's nothing that really covers my processes, or?
Well, you obviously need a license that you do get checked for, and certain licenses are a lot harder to acquire. 3D printing and engineering licenses are slightly harder to acquire.
Besides what you said, I think there's 2 answers to this question. If you're talking about plastic 3D printing and you want to do urban furniture, print this table in the construction, you don't probably need legislation. But if you want to print concrete, and you need all the
structural
all the
materials,
permits from the municipalities and take that's a different ball game.
Okay. And then I guess the municipality has to somehow audit your processes and your quality of
Exactly.
product.
As we speak, none of the Gulf region countries, and probably none in the world, have legislation to support 3D printing concrete.
Okay.
It's being evolved. Now, you don't have, if you build something 3D printed, there is nothing, if you go to any government body, that says that's a building 3D printed.
And Tobias, Museum of the Future is part of the kind of the wider showcasing of innovation in this market. And so, is it being used to help establish regulation or legislation? How do the learnings from a project like Museum of the Future transfer into the government guidelines?
Sure. I mean, certainly the form of structure, even in a traditional sense, steelwork. Steelwork's not a common material here like it is in the US, and we've been working very closely with the authorities just on old-fashioned topics of ensuring that we're both understanding the complexities of welding on site, which is still quite new in this region, and we had a similar arrangement with the Louvre in Abu Dhabi, working with the Abu Dhabi authorities on similar topics. So I think that the key step for both of your fields is of course where I sit in the consultant space, and both engineers and architects. We're of course talking about 3D printing being a sort of, forgive the phrase, a sort of reactionary idea that will if I specify a column that's this big, that you then decide to 3D print it. But it should probably be the other way around, that me as the consultant and the architect decide from day one. Let's do a 3D printed column or whatever the structure might be.
Why would you make that decision as the architect? Would you do it because you think 3D printing can produce better shapes for your design, or would it be for site safety? Or,
I think for both. I think that the appeal for 3D printing that you have to sell are always the classic points of risks in construction. So speed and time, quality of the final building, and health and safety is a huge one. If you can print large portions of the superstructure very safely with an unmanned cradle, as you've described, that's surely a lot safer than the current methods that we employ. So they would be the motivators for designers to take those decisions. And of course the architectural ones you were showing me some examples earlier on of very beautiful looking columns that we would struggle to form with traditional methods.
Yes, I wanted to find out with concrete printing, I think you make a good point around plastic and metal is now reasonably commercialized. So are we trying with concrete 3D, are we trying to find a problem to solve? Because is there a problem? Are we having problems manufacturing in traditional concrete?
Very important question. When it comes to concrete, I think it doesn't solve any problem now. But as disruptive technology, if you see any disruptive technology in the last years, it creates a new business opportunity. I don't think at the moment you have a problem that 3D printing will solve, unless, as he says exactly, that if you have very complex shape, it's going to be easier to 3D print it, definitely, than whether plastic, metal, or concrete. It's far easier to make complex shape in 3D printing because we have, let's say, in some of our projects, we have these designs that looks like Michelangelo. So it's definitely much easier to go print the 3D printing. But the scope is slow. What you will see, it's a game changer. It will be a game changer. And additive manufacturing, first to answer the plastic, and because exactly always the answer might be different between plastic, metal from one side, concrete from the other side. As for plastic and metal, additive manufacturing, all studies shows that 15% of traditional manufacturing will convert to additive manufacturing, and we see big players, couriers, online shopping going into 3D printing, because instead of shipping this from China to Dubai, it might, if you find a way to 3D print it in Dubai in cheaper way, then you will have a digital inventory, and then you'll print it when you need it. So that's the disruptive part of the metal and the plastic. As far as concrete, it's gonna create a totally new business model, and this brings me to, we're very active in, as you know, in the World Economic Forum. We're active member designing the what's called the future of construction, looking at 2050 vision and imagine the world version, different scenarios, extreme scenarios. And the three scenarios we forecasted that are extreme, and probably the world will be a mixture of both. One is the virtual world when it comes to construction, which talks about exactly what you said before, artificial intelligence, big data, and robotics. So you can imagine a world connected, and with robots, be it 3D printed or others, autonomous driving, all working doing, and you can remotely measure them, and with all the big data analytics, it helps you to do things better. So this is one version of the reality in 2050. Another one was more a green reboot. God forbid we have a disaster environment, and then all the construction will be driven by environmental friendliness, by having construction method that is sustainable, material that's reusable, etc. So how would the world would look like, and what construction industry needs to do. The third one that we foresee is the other extreme version, is that a factory runs the world. Exactly what you said, prefabrication. And each one, eventually we have startups now that are starting, and we're in contact with them now. One startup for the first vision is that Katera in USA. Katera, it's only suitable for USA because it's wooden small houses, and it does the factory runs the world. It mimics a bit because it's streamlined from design to engineering, and you design the house, they prefabricate it in their factories, and then the role of the contractor will be more assembly. We're not contracting. That's one scenario. Another scenario, like robots around the world, maybe it's still primitive, but the idea is an Australian startup building bricks, I guess. It will build the house like a Lego. Okay, so practically it's like a robot, other than 3D printing. It supports the traditional mean, and you can remotely. If you add to this autonomous driving for construction equipment, if you add to this AI, big data, artificial intelligence, etc., so you can foresee different future.
So if I am involved in the construction industry and I want to get some inspiration or ideas,
you don't want to do that at this stage, believe me.
Where do I go and find this? So this was part of the World Economic Forum and looking at the future of construction in 2050, and you had these scenarios. Is there an online a website?
Very good question. We are in the process of releasing the final version now, so you can expect it during May maximum.
Who is we? That's the World Economic Forum.
Yeah, we're active member with World Economic Forum, BCG, and many other leaders in the world.
Okay.
And
BCG, Boston Consulting Group.
Exactly. And last year version is online. Because we have been doing this for many years.
Where online?
On World Economic Forum.
So if I go to the World Economic Forum website and I type in construction.
Yeah, it's publicly available.
Okay.
The intention is not to keep it for us. Intention is to drive innovation across the whole industry, the whole construction companies and corporates in the world, and most importantly, the governmental body to support the station.
So if I want to get ideas about potential scenarios and technologies, World Economic Forum website, look for the construction report from last year, and this year's one will come out quite soon.
It's going to come out anytime now.
Okay.
And if I could just go back to Sandeep's point, what problem does it solve? For me, the most exciting thing is what it did with manufacturing as well, and what we're still doing with manufacturing with 3D printing, is it is that last bridge between technology and, as we were discussing, BIM, and yes, it's being used more and more on site, but even in some of the most advanced countries in the world, from our understanding, BIM gets used to a point, but it almost gets discarded at that final stage of construction. 3D printing can be almost that connection between this virtual world and this unbelievable technology that we've been creating for the last 20 years, and the physical world, as opposed to it getting to the point of actually constructing it, and then go back to very rudimentary methods of constructing that we've been doing for.
So the 3D printing software can be driven or plugged directly into the BIM model.
Not right now, but the softwares that we use are extremely similar. So that's where I foresee it happening. Becoming part of it, and where with artificial intelligence getting linked into BIM more and more. Okay. A BIM model should be able to tell you where you can 3D print. Say, that column works to 3D print, that doesn't, and that sort of idea.
Okay, now we've got about 15 minutes left on the broadcast, so the conversation has been very dynamic, and so I've forgotten to invite questions, but we have some already. I'm going to go to the questions now, so I apologize for cutting you off there. But
if I may, before the question, just very quickly, we have touched a lot on 3D printing, but there's so much innovation in other technologies and robotics in the construction industry. Like we're experimenting auto-plastering robots, tie bars, rebars, robotic and rebar, drones in construction. Drones is becoming part of our construction life cycle, and many others. So 3D printing is very exciting, but there are so many other areas that also we have much more mature technology that's suitable for construction at the moment.
Okay, well,
One of
I've
them
just-
is drones for sure.
I've just been handed a digital note telling me that we can have some extra time if we want to explore some of these
Okay,
points.
one
So-
of the technology we're exploring lately probably is a startup in Dubai. Again, is that we're at the final stage of sealing a strategic partnership. We haven't sealed it yet. Hopefully, we'll maintain with Wake Up. Wake Up is when it comes to CCC, our pillar is safety. The safety of our labor and staff comes first, before profitability, before quality, before anything else. When I met Wake Up is done by a brilliant engineer, Hassan, and it's a helmet that you can trace labors using mesh networks and Bluetooth technologies, and it will detect many hazards to improve on safety. For instance, a shock, you can have the labor can have an SOS and press and will send SOS. You can send evacuation. It sends a noise for people to evacuate. And we're planning to implement this as a pilot. Hopefully in May, start kickoff.
This is on hard hats, is it? Or-
Yeah. In Opera Grand Tower. Project in Dubai. We're planning to test this technology this is one example of the startup that we are putting them with the subject matter expert and creating the field. So we have many things. If your time permits, we can speak about many other technologies that we're experimenting also. That is really far more mature at the moment than 3D printing concrete, not the plastic, and like drones. Drones we have implemented in Oman, drones for surveying. On huge fields. What took before manually 3 months, it took less than 3 hours with higher accuracy and with better quality.
Wow.
And far by far less cost,
So
obviously. And the only challenge for drones, I come to government, is that permit, that's the biggest challenge, to have a permit to fly a drone, to have a weather condition that supports, and to have clients' approval.
So you mentioned Oman there and drone surveying, and you mentioned Trimble earlier. So one of the questions, maybe it's the same project.
Trimble is one of the solution provider that contractors can use.
So
we use Trimble and others.
Well, Trimble
in our field.
they used to do they're American, aren't they? Do the defense satellites years back, and then they
Trimble
do
is
GPS.
much bigger than.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, but we're exploring many other vendors. I'm not here to make because the drones is very mature technology. What we are maturing is the surveying, and now we're taking drones to progress monitoring. At the moment, as we speak, we're taking drones to progress monitoring, is to basically keep flying a drone above a project site, survey multiple times, and the delta will be the progress, and you can even quantify it.
I'd like to just comment on that because we were discussing this earlier. This is where the crossover begins to come. In commercially, assessing project risks is a huge part of what we do. We have engineers, we have construction engineers who are part of the bank that do these. I think the level of personalized data that these technologies can offer us and allow us to risk assess these and appraise the projects, the progress, I think allows us to offer far more customized project financing capabilities, and be able to encourage developers, contractors to continue to push the boundaries of the pace of development and be able to fund the ecosystem, if you may, on. So, it would be really good to see how we could participate in
You just pay money. You just pay money, and we welcome you.
If there are,
I think the point is that they don't want to just pay money; they want to be
just
part of
to
the
see-
process.
yes.
That
we
would
want
be
to
great to
understand
bring
the-
the Sandeep on board.
I think what you're both talking about is almost the same thing. It can be wrapped up as smart buildings and sensor technology, which we've also talked about. So we do quite a lot of work in the design space of we coin it as people movement. So we now model physically, parametrically little people in the BIM model, and we let loose 500 people, and we give them all decision-making algorithms, and they move through the building. And we have a wonderful user interface that allows you to watch these people moving through the building. So on the museum, we did the same. We've checked our architectural spaces, our fire strategy, corridor widths, everything else. And the drones is just an extension of that. So sensors during construction can track people, and we've talked about smart buildings. So an extension of the people movement work I've talked about is when the building opens, the building remains self-aware of how many people are in the building at any one time and where they are on different floors. and it can prepare itself for certain eventualities. A
We
good
have very,
example
by
is-
the way, we have very similar solutions that we're relying on now for our multi-billion-dollar projects. Is all based on CCT, Computer Communication Technology, which is a company in Beirut. They have now we have the BIM. They're sponsoring the BIM event, 29 and 30 in Dubai, and they've designed. It's part of CC. It's like IT subsidiary of CC. You can think of it, but it's an independent entity that designs project control solutions. Which is very much of what you're saying, to taking BIM to the field.
Yeah,
and
that-
from
that
planning
BIM
to
model-
progress monitoring to quality control to many other aspects.
Sure. I mean, that model that starts off day one of the design then lives as part of the operations of the building. And
This is what
and
BIM should
all
be,
of the features
and that's what we're targeting.
live in that model. So all of the fire exit strategy, algorithms for what the lifts should be doing, that's all great for evacuation and emergency scenarios, but also for day to day, particularly from a tall building scenario.
What we're changing with engaging startup is to fail soon to succeed earlier. That's our strategy. We should accept failure. Without failure, you don't have innovation. Okay, you can't drive innovation and you want to do it right the first time. Okay, so we are. This is a part of the R&D and the piloting project that we are providing to startup, is to be able to. When I talked about startup and collaborating, and I mentioned only few from the 10, we do not treat them. When I said I do not treat them as a client, it means that we help them succeed. And for instance, with the color, with the molds, with Imensa, we failed 3 times, but we succeeded. Had we not failed 3 times, we wouldn't have succeeded. So we have to create. I agree with you. It's challenging. It's more mentality and culture probably, but we're changing that.
Because that is a bit the culture here. You know, there is a huge appetite to take on new technologies, but the private industry and the public sector here will tell you, come back when it is ready. Like you said, when you're ready.
That's probably not just here. I think that's probably everywhere where there's commercials.
Maybe it's more on. Maybe it's we see this more here. I agree with them.
Yeah.
I'd like to make the point. Sorry, is see, you cannot take business models that exist, let's say in Silicon Valley, and how these entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley operate, and show up here and expect the same reaction, if you may. It has to be aligned to the rest of the ecosystem. Sorry.
But probably we have now we can see probably the only autonomous driven train in the world. So Dubai can probably play a role
100%.
like another Silicon Valley.
And I think they want to. That's the desire of this country.
I
It's
think
not
Dubai
just
can play a
it's
big
not
role
just
in the
to
region.
take technology that's made in the rest of the world to here. This place needs to develop its own
But that's the
technology.
uniqueness. It is the nation and the government leaders who are taking such an important role in driving innovation, and that will be the nature of. So Silicon Valley is not that. It's through private entrepreneurship, whereas these markets are so heavily led by the inspirational leadership of the nation.
Brilliant.
Okay, I'm going to come in because we've had a number of questions and you guys have been so engaged in this conversation, which is very important. Fantastic conversation. But I think we should give our audience some comments. So I will put out these questions and whoever feels best equipped to answer. So I haven't vetted the questions, so I don't know what they are. So for contractors to use professional agents for completing their 3D models, who takes the liability in case there are efficiencies? So who takes the risk and who has the gain, I suppose? Is it the consultant or the contractor, or is it the 3D printing company? How does the contracting model work? Is it just traditional subcontracting?
If the contract is awarded by the contractor as design and build in the civil, we call it, or EPC in the mechanical, then definitely liability falls under the contractor. Okay. Otherwise, if the 3D model is provided by the engineering, then there is a liability of the engineering. Okay.
So it follows the same models that we currently have for procurement.
Exactly.
Okay.
We
So
it doesn't
can
change
only
anything.
assume that would be the same for what we're currently doing.
The same thing. Exactly.
Okay, and then I guess if there's a partnership with a startup, there's a JV type model or something.
Exactly. So whoever used to do this manually and liable for the manual work is doing it digitally, and they're still liable for it.
Okay, this question here is for Sandeep. Sandeep, how will you address the shortage of liquidity, especially for subcontractors who are mostly SMEs? What is scaring the banks to pump liquidity into the system? So I guess this goes to your point about risk profiling and.
True. it's a recognized problem, and we are getting there are a couple of things happening. One is the whole banking ecosystem is holding hands, and we've got the United Bank Federation, which is a consortium of all the local banks, which is getting together and understanding the nature of risk policies that need to be put in place so that the level of financing can be done more intelligently, and also making sure that the early warning signals, because some of these contractors end up working across and get financed by multiple banks, and we have sufficient early warning indicators to then step in and in a meaningful way help them overcome their financial difficulties. So yes, the technology is working in a much more richer and much more intelligent way, but also the collaborative nature of the banking federations is helping address this very crucial issue.
Well, thank you very much to all of you in the panel. I'm going to have to bring the session to a close. That was a very dynamic and engaging conversation, so thank you for your time, and thank you. To the audience for their questions and for being with us today. Tobias Bauly from Buro Happold, good luck with the Museum of the
Thank
Future.
you very much. Thank you.
We look forward
to all seeing it.
To watching it. Thank you for your time. Dominic Wright, good luck with Generation 3D, especially in this endeavour in the construction industry. Aref, Boualwan, CCC, congratulations on what you've been doing.
Thank you.
It's very,
pleasure to be here.
It's very exciting to hear a construction company thinking like this. I think that's unusual, in my opinion, in the industry. And Sandeep Chouhan, thank you for your time and your expertise on the fintech sector.
Thank you. We truly appreciate the opportunity to partner with MEED. Thank you.
Shukran, and it's great to do it. And so we look forward to seeing you next time. Good night and have a good weekend.